next one, that is Professor Marco Balsi, High Density Area LiDAR Survey for the LiFE project. You will see the database they have produced for the project. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. My presentation regards what is an earlier stage of the LiFE project, because this is the data acquisition phase that has been already completed last year. This part of the work was performed by OBEN, which is a small enterprise coming from university spin-off that works on aerial surveys based on UAVs, but as I will comment, not only UAVs. In fact, this octocopter is was in principle the main platform used for scanning using a LiDAR, which is mounted under the octocopter. This is called Yellow Scan Mapper. Some data you already saw from Giovanni's presentation. The main data is it acquires about 20,000 points per second with up to 3 echoes, flying at an operational altitude of 70 to 100 meters above ground level. And the platform is an octocopter, relatively large, but still a light UAV with diameter 1.8 meters, weight 16 kilograms, and autonomy maximum 20 minutes, but operational about 10-12 minutes. The typical flight profile is at a speed of 5 meters per second and, yes, 70 meters above ground level. And the typical area we can survey in a day is between 20 and 50 hectares, depending on the situation on ground, the ease of accessing the place, the complication of the orography, and so on. The characteristics of such platform is flying at low speed and low altitude, which allows to attain quite high point density per unit area. In the surveys performed for LiFE, we obtained between 50 and 120 points per square meters in total, and of those points, between 1 and 10 were on ground. Those forests are very dense, so we get a small percentage of points from the ground. The flight is completely automatic, but due to regulations, it is mandatory to execute the flight under constant control by the pilot within visual line of sight. This is a very strong limitation, because normally, especially when we talk about forests, maintaining visual line of sight means flying very close to the pilot and not being able to access valleys and so on. In fact, what we are waiting for is the development of what is at European level, what is called U-Space, which basically is the European framework for flight of drones beyond visual line of sight. So a really completely automatic flight. There is a roadmap for those regulations, and we expect within few years to have the second phase of U-Space in place, which might happen around 2020. and then flying beyond the visual line of sight will be possible, which will open up new perspectives for forestry applications. Due to these limitations, we had to use also a manned platform. In this case, it is a light helicopter, which has such characteristic as being able to fly at low altitude and low speed with respect to a larger helicopter. So we can maintain a flight profile that is very similar to the octocopter. And that also allowed us to test the sensing procedure and the flight profile also on the large areas that we surveyed. In this project there are 3 sites, and we surveyed more than 200 hectares on each site. Of course, with the helicopter you can survey a larger area in a day, 100 to 200 hectares. At a cost that is higher than the drone, but is reasonably sustainable, and the helicopter can fly in critical areas, in shared airspace, in restricted areas, with the limitation that, again, flying low in very steep areas can be dangerous. So there are some limitations, but basically you can cover everything. These are the sites of Fresh Life. I won't comment more because you already heard something about these places. These are just some samples just to show the kind of data that we can obtain. In particular, it is to show that they are very dense, that you can basically see individual trees, even if it is very difficult to separate the trees from each other, because the forest is very dense and trees are interwoven. This is another example showing the point cloud over the estimation of the terrain. So the brown part is a mesh of the ground points, and over that we have the point cloud of the vegetation. And this shows, in particular for the Rincine area, the DTM obtained for that case. This is Montevenere at Caprarola, Lago di Vico. Okay, we wanted to have a validation of the quality of the data that we obtained. So one way of validating the data was using data that are available for the Rincine area based on a airborne laser scanner survey that was performed in 2013. That scan has lower density, but we can take it as a reference, at least to check what are the differences which can tell us something about the accuracy. This graph shows the height differences. Okay, this is not pointing. Okay. Okay, but I can use this as well. So this is height differences between the two scans. What we can see from this graph is that first it is bimodal, which probably is related to the fact that there are areas that were covered by different flights and have different errors over that. In any case, the average difference is 0.8 meters, which means that there is a systematic error, and there is a smaller standard deviation than the average. So this is really a systematic difference. Part of these differences can be also caused by the fact that the density of the two scans is different. So and maybe there might be also some horizontal error that causes these differences. However, the two data sets are quite consistent between each other, and this is a qualitative comparison of some sections, just to show how they are quite well superimposed. So basically the differences are not larger than what you might just expect as a standard deviation of the points. Then we also performed a qualitative comparison with an orthophotograph, that is the one obtained using the EB by the University of Florence. And in this case, we just checked some points where the streets, where the roads are visible, and they look quite well superimposed. And we also extracted some geometries, such as this road or the perimeter of some open fields, and we also superimposed that on the orthophotograph, and they superimposed quite well. Of course, this is quite just qualitative evaluation. Internal consistency of the data shows that differences within the data set are quite small. Of course, they are really small within a single flight. They are larger between different flights. That is probably due to the geolocalization. And then we, well, I'll be short on that because I have no time, but basically we set up a way of evaluating the possible error due to a wrong superposition of different passes of the LiDAR. You know that the LiDAR produces stripes of data that are overlapping. So on the overlapping area, there might be some misalignment, both vertically and horizontally. The horizontal misalignment is very difficult to measure because you need targets to do that. And we tried to put targets in the forest, but it's really very difficult. Actually, we didn't succeed in that because you need huge targets to see them in the point cloud under the very dense coverage of the canopy. Huh? That is a good idea, but I don't think the forests would be happy about it. Okay, so basically what we did is, suppose we have two stripes of data that are the red one and the black one, and they are at different levels. So how can we recognize that? Basically, our idea is that we take at every point, at every single point, we take a sphere around and see the distribution of the points, which is measured by rugosity or roughness. And basically, depending on the scale where you're looking at roughness, if you are looking at a small scale, you will see the roughness within a single flight, if there is such a step between two flights. If you are at a larger scale, you will see the whole step, let's say. But if you have a too large scale, then you will see also the variations in level of the ground. Basically, I will not comment much about this table, but here we have single flights in the columns and scale in the rows. And merge means the 5 flights merged together. And basically what we can see from this table, without going into the details, is that the rugosity that we see on the merged data set is almost the same as on the single flights, which means that there are no significant misalignments. At least the misalignments are not larger than the dispersion of points that is due to okay, I'm over time. That is due to the LiDAR error. Okay, this is again about roughness, but let's skip that. Conclusions. We executed the LiDAR survey on about 700 hectares total in the 3 sites, and we validated the quality of data. The point density is significantly higher than what can normally obtained by conventional aerial platforms flying a lot higher, even if this LiDAR gets relatively few points per second, but we are flying a lot lower than an airplane or a helicopter. The cost of drone-based survey is low, but there are regulatory constraints that currently prevent coverage of all areas. We hope that these limitations will be overcome within few years due to new European regulation. In the meantime, we used a light helicopter that allowed us to complete the task. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Really very interesting and important. I think the LIFE program has the main aim to transfer technology and to apply to see what can be used operationally. So we have seen something very important at a very good scale, because 700 hectares is an important area being covered by drones, with some progress, but also very important opportunities indeed. So if we have one or two questions. Yes,
very quickly. I want to know only if you use only the GPS on board to do to obtain the geometry of the laser scanner, or you use the GPS to improve the position in case in this case you can reduce the error in horizontal the horizontal error in the
GPS data is recorded on board the LiDAR, and then we perform a post-processing correction by PPK, precise point, well, I don't remember the acronym. So we do it in post-processing by having our base station recording during the time of the flight, and then we use that to correct. So in principle, the GPS is corrected at RTK quality.
Okay. Thanks.
Good. Other questions? Livio, please.
Is there a consolidated or already studied relationship between number of points versus a species structure and final accuracy? So for accuracy. So copies of chestnut needs dot point, high forest beach, others.
I think this is beyond what is currently available. In fact, I am not working directly on that. I worked a little bit on just separating single trees within a complex canopy, but I think we are still far from recognizing the 3 species yet. Even separating single trees is still something quite open. In such a complicated structure, it is quite well solved, for instance, in conifer stands, because in that case it's easy to find the single trees by looking at the apex. But in such a complicated structure where trees are very different from each other, have no evidence apex, are very densely mixed, well, this is still quite open.
Okay, then another important point, but I think that the good answer now could be the former presentation, where we have to use UAV and LiDAR data as far as we do not have a global coverage of Italy as a multi-level, multi-platform approach. That's the only way to go more in depth and more upgrading scale compared to the plots. Then moving on Marco.